Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me at the market site in Times Square, we have Kyle Drop. He is the co-founder and chief research officer over at Morning Consult. We're going to take a look at understanding Gen Z. Kyle, it's great to have you with me. Before we get into that, you guys are doing some pretty cool stuff over at Morning Consult, and basically brand intelligence, it's now global.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Well, thanks for having us. You know, we're a tech and media company, and we've grown just over the past 5 years to about 130 people in 4 cities, and we're running surveys on just about everything. And so I'm excited to chat about some of the Gen Z findings today.
Yeah, and some of the findings were super interesting with understanding Gen Z. What kind of categories does someone from Gen Z fall into first?
Sure, and before getting into that, so one of the things I love most about my job is we're interviewing about 20,000 people every single day, you know, probably 15 countries all around the world, working with some of the best companies and news outlets in the world, whether it's, you know, the Times or Bloomberg or Nasdaq or you name it. And so for this report, we talked to 1,000 adults 18 to 21. That's how we categorized people in Gen Z. And so that's what we did for this report. Over the course of the year, we've probably talked to 250,000 people in Gen Z. And this report is unique in that it compares Gen Z with millennials, older adults, boomers. Age really structures how people think about the world. And I'm excited to chat about some of our findings.
And it's interesting because millennials, there are some similarities there, but Gen Z is very different in terms of drive.
Oh, they sure are. They're very individualistic. They're focused on making money, getting ahead, working hard. When you compare Gen Z with older adults or boomers, they care a bit less about organized religion. They care a little bit less thinking about like sort of gender identity and how much they focus on that, at least, is what we're seeing in the data. But you know, these are folks who are trying to get their first or second job and get ahead and set themselves up for a promising future.
Well, I also think that they're very liberal and socially conscious, but they favor capitalism and socialism at the same time. That was a very cool finding.
Well, the capitalism versus socialism divide is one that's been getting a ton of attention in recent months. As you know, there's findings out that younger Americans might see capitalism in a less favorable light than socialism. For example, if you talk to older Americans, half of them have a negative view of socialism. You know, they grew up in the era of the Soviet Union, whereas far fewer younger people. Now, with that in mind, when we talk to the Gen Z adults, they tend to have more, you know, pretty favorable views of capitalism. You know, about 40% favorable view, slightly more favorable views than slightly older adults, millennials. So we still sort of do see a divide, but you know, Gen Z is more optimistic about, you know, capitalism, democracy, and a number of these elements.
No, you got to get that money if you want to have all your Insta shots up there. I bet you that's big. Social media has clearly influenced that. Gen Z, though, how it gets its news, and this seems kind of obvious.
When I saw the results to this study, this is the one thing that stood out to me. The way in which Gen Z engages with the world and consumes news and media is like they're living on a different planet than older adults. Half of them consume the majority of their news on social media, and that's compared with 17% of older adults, so a 3x difference. And then by contrast, only about 12% say they go to TV first when they're looking at news. That number, by contrast, for older adults is about 40%. So 12 versus 42, certainly a big thing when you're thinking about all the ways in which, whether it's radio or TV or social media or newspapers, where people are consuming news today. And I'm sure advertisers, celebrities, endorsers, you name it, are thinking about that today.
And that's why this content is all going out on social platforms.
Sure.
All right, let's wrap it up here. Consumer habits, that's clearly why companies are going to care about this report.
Yeah, so we're tracking, in addition to what people think of 3,000 companies and brands and products every day, we're tracking hundreds of celebrities and influencers and you name it. And in many cases, you know, companies want to understand, you know, who are their users and who is going to influence their users per se. And so for Gen Z, the influencers are quite distinct. Kim Kardashian is not popular among average Americans, but she's quite popular among Gen Z. In addition, other influencers who really do seem to matter here, Beyonce, Bieber is more popular among younger Americans, such as Gen Z here. So when you're just thinking about who are the people who are going to get, you know, Gen Z to act and to do things, that makes sense. Circling back on a few of the other points, you know, it's just social media first, things move fast, Gen Z is trying to get ahead, and so we'll be continuing to track what Gen Z, millennials, and all these generations think about the sort of key things that are driving their purchase behavior and frankly, how they spend their time.
All right, Kyle, thank you so much for joining us at
Hey,
MarketSite.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining me on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.